And welcome into the Wednesday edition of the McCulloch Show here on FM 92.7 AM 1400, The Patriot. Glad you could join us for the fastest hour in local Detroit talk radio. Hope you're ready for some stimulating conversation, and we're going to have that tonight. I'm also very much looking forward to talking to our guest this evening for a number of reasons. Debbie Georgatos is a member of the Salem family. She hails from Dallas, Texas, via California and Nevada, and who knows where else. She's an educated lawyer. She's also a stay-at-home mom for a period of time, and she is a conservative. And as a conservative, she faces, and as a woman, she faces the same things that all conservative women face: ridicule and Saul Alinsky-type tactics from those who are on the other side. And she's a delight to talk to. I've listened to some of her talks, and she speaks all over America. She's a frequent contributor to Fox News. Anyway, Debbie Georgatos joins us now. And Debbie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so very much for having me on.
Well, I couldn't resist it when I found out that you existed down there in Dallas. And I wanted to find out exactly what it was all about. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the phone lines to any questions that the audience might have. 800-923-9385. That's 800-923-WDTK. As always, your questions are much more important than mine. Again, 800-923-9385. That's 800-923-WDTK. By the way, all of Debbie's contact information, including information about her book, about her show, and just her general website, is all at facebook.com/thepatriotdetroit. It's all there now for you, and I think you're going to probably want to go there once we get to talking with Debbie. Debbie, let's start out with the obvious question, and it is obvious, and I know you get asked this a lot, but I think we need to know your explanation for it. Why, when we are making so much constitutional sense, why, when we express dearly our love for the Constitution and our real disdain for what's being done to it, why do women overwhelmingly vote Democrat in the face of all this?
That's one of the main topics I tackled in my book, Ladies Can We Talk? I'm really glad you asked it. I think women, a lot of polling will look very surface and make it seem as though women just are driven by one or two issues, but really at the heart of what drives women's vote historically has been, I distill it down to two terms. One is compassion. They have compassion for the poor, for minorities, and they hear things in political speech that sound as though they're compassionate solutions. And they want fairness, and this word fairness is bandied about so much, especially by the American left, that makes people think that the fair answers are whatever the left is offering, whether it's economic or social answers. And so I think it's really incumbent on people trying to convince women to come on the conservative side to use those terms, to speak in that language. I think that conservative answers are more compassionate and ultimately fairer for everyone in society. But I think those are two things that they can spread out: economic issues, social issues, those ideas of compassion and fairness.
And the pictures that stick in people's minds, this Paul Ryan dumping grandma off a cliff out of a wheelchair and things like that, things that are totally unfair representations, can, I guess, be explained as far as how they are accepted by the fact that people just don't have the time to check into things the way they used to. And they look, they see those images, and they say, oh, yeah, well, that's the Republicans, and they move on. And I don't... unless the left stops doing that sort of thing, we can expect more of the same, can't we?
I think that's very true. And another great example, the one you gave is a great example. Another one, when Obamacare passed, President Obama had behind him on the stage, maybe they were really doctors, it doesn't really matter, but he had people who looked to be doctors, who were dressed in doctors' white outfits. And then they also had sob stories or sad stories. This family had this horrible thing happen, and because their health insurance wasn't adequate, they had this terrible outcome. The left uses the heartstrings in speeches, and really the elected officials on the left use the heartstring picture stories. And I think that's part of what on the American right, to be able to convince people about the virtues of conservatism, following the Constitution. I'm a big constitutionalist, limited government and free markets. we have to be able to sell those ideas in more human, personal terms. I do a lot of speaking and encourage people, if you can tell a story, people will remember the stories long before they'll recall, or much longer than they'll recall the 3 bullet point arguments you made. So telling stories to convey the great outcomes that come from free markets, limited government, and really in the Constitution, it's hard to do, but it's kind of like the structure of a bridge that you need to keep in place to keep the bridge in place. The Constitution is like a structure that keeps America, it's supposed to keep America free of tyranny. It's supposed to protect the power of the individual. And picture stories are vital, and we don't do them very often.
We're talking with Debbie Georgatos. She hails from Dallas, Texas. Both her radio show and her book are entitled Ladies, Can We Talk? Links to both at facebook.com/The Patriot Detroit. Debbie, one of the things that I harp on frequently, and I hate to use the word harp, but that's what I do, is the dissatisfaction that I have, that many of our listeners have, and that many people across the country have for the Republican establishment. There's even talk now that if Donald Trump somehow gets the nomination, they're going to void the entire convention and bring back Romney to run again with Paul Ryan. And they're serious about this. Do you personally share our dissatisfaction with the way we have been lied to by the Republican establishment and their abhorrence for Donald Trump, based mainly on the fact that he's probably going to rock the boat if he gets in? He may break up some of these old money trails that lead all the way through Washington. Talk to me about that.
I'm so glad you asked that question. You know, one term that Ted Cruz uses about the Washington people, he calls it the cartel, and to me that's a great term. You have a picture of a cartel smuggling drugs. It's the whole cartel of Washington. Yes, I do. I'm deeply frustrated with the establishment in Washington, and right now, just this week, there's an issue about what to do as of this Friday, the 11th. The Congress needs to pass again another budget bill, and their same old conduct they've done. They say they give lip service to the idea we're going to really try to defund Planned Parenthood. We're really going to try to stop the president's illegal amnesty. We're really going to work on this, and they don't mean it. And I think that the primary voter base on the GOP side has watched the Republican establishment conduct themselves in a dishonest manner over and over and over and over, and it really becomes obvious that the things that both Donald Trump and Ted Cruz say about Washington are true, that the GOP may have wonderful ideas and their platform sounds, it's very mainstream America, but within Washington, the establishment in the House and the Senate and the RNC, there are people who are just entrenched and they love their power and they like getting money from the Chamber of Commerce. They're not going to change anything about the immigration procedures. They're not going to stop anything President Obama does. And I think especially after this massive turnout and turning the Senate over to GOP control in the last midterm election, and nothing changes in Washington. I think if you want to know why Trump is so popular, it is Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, the whole Republican establishment. We should look in the mirror because they're the reason he's popular. And if they do this thing this week again with the budget where they pretend they're going to fight, but they aren't really going to fight at all, they are going to ensure Donald Trump wins that nomination. And the more they pile on him, especially with this comment he made about his immigration policy, the more establishment piles on him, the more primary voters will support him. It's just astonishing to watch. So obviously, yes, I'm deeply frustrated with the GOP establishment.
Well, that kind of begs the question then, Debbie. Is it too late to speak truth to power and change things the way they should be changed?
I think there needs to be a much more major shakeup in Washington before any of the entrenched GOP will change. I really do think it's possible, this idea that's being whispered about, that if Donald Trump wins the nomination, the GOP will somehow, or he's on the path to win the nomination, the GOP will somehow pull the political rug out. I think that's entirely possible. I will say, I really put Cruz in pretty much the same category as Trump. I think if either Ted Cruz or Donald Trump wins the nomination or is on the track to do that, this unsettles not just the Democrats and Hillary, but the entire GOP in Washington, because they hear what he's saying. Both of them are saying, we're not going to play the game that's been established in Washington for decades now. We're going to shake things up, and they are not going to take that sitting down.
Well, I guess time will tell on that one. And I guess this is really going to be a case of the people versus the government, because we are clearly being governed against our will right now, and that's not something that sits very well with me, and I'm sure it doesn't with you. Let's talk about some specific issues, because I read with I'm sitting grinning now at some of the things that you have managed to rip apart as far as the left is concerned. And we are in a constant battle here on this broadcast over global schmarming or global warming, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that it is a totally false science, that it is the only thing it's really doing is killing a lot of birds and eating up a lot of money, as far as I'm concerned. And the 97% consensus, the way you systematically rip that apart is just classic. And I wonder if in a short period of time, because there are a lot of callers standing by that want to talk to you, could explain that. Just does it work on the radio, I guess is my question.
I can try to do it, and I do know for your listeners that numbers are hard to follow on the radio, so I'll try to say very few numbers. But the short story is, when people hear that 97% of scientists agree that global climate change is man-made and it's going to cause a disaster, it sounds like there was a poll taken of all climatologists or all smart scientists. But the truth is, where that came from was a bunch of papers that were written by scientists to address the question of this impact of climate and CO2 in the climate, what's happening there. So in this whole tally of papers written, someone reviewed them and came up with the answer that, nearly all of them say, yes, global climate change is a really, really bad thing, and it is going to kill us all, and all these scientists agree. So this became something the left just repeats the number, kind of like they repeat the number about women earning whatever it is, 77 cents on a dollar versus men, which is also a lie. But back to climate change, within these papers written by these scientists, they were asked the question about, the impact of CO2 and climate change, climate temperature change. And so if you dig in and ask, well, who among those papers, and I'm trying to dig up the thing on my website while we're talking, so I don't say any numbers incorrect, but the short story is, it's really about 0.3% of those 12,000 papers written by scientists where a scientist actually said, yes, I think man-made global climate change is happening and it's going to be disastrous. It was 0.3, not 97%. And the reason what they did is they took answers scientists gave to things like, well, if you had to rank number one, it's going to be a disaster. Number two, not so sure. Number three, it's not a problem at all. However the person answered it, they counted that as an answer affirming the left-wing view of global climate change. So the real answer is these scientists didn't do anything like what the left has said, but it's become truth ingrained in culture. And if that wasn't very clear for your listeners, I'm trying to dig the actual thing I wrote, because I'm not a good numbers person here I have it up there. That was the basic point, is that number didn't come from a real poll. It came from someone reading papers. And actually, an investigator went back and looked recently and called these people, checked back, read the papers, called these people, and said, no, the answer is not 97% of scientists said that. It's about 0.3 among all those nearly 12,000 papers.
Our guest is Debbie Georgatos. She is from Texas. She is an author. She is a radio host, and she is a conservative. If you would like to talk to her, 800-923-9385 is the number. That's 800-923-WDTK. We'll get you in there. If you're on hold right now, just stay with us. I have a couple of more questions, and then we're going to get to you. And if you're not in line, get in line at 800-923-9385 as we continue with John McCulloch here on FM 92.7, AM 1400, The Patriot. John McCulloch Show here on FM 92.7, AM 1400, The Patriot. And we are in honor of the Christmas season, playing Christmas music. And a reminder that we say Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and the like here on the McCulloch Show. And our guest is Debbie Georgatos. She is from Dallas, Texas. She is a radio host. She also is an author. Her book is Ladies, Can We Talk? And that's also the name of her radio show, which you can listen to online. The link to that is at facebook.com/The Patriot Detroit. I believe you're on Sunday evenings. Is that correct, Debbie?
Yes, sir. Sunday, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time.
And the second hour is a roundtable discussion. And I wish I had a second hour because then I could do a roundtable discussion.
It is very fun. I'm sure you would enjoy it, too. Yep.
I'm going to listen. Talk to me about Clock Boy. I don't get this, and I've tried to be kind. I've tried to be understanding, but this defies, as do many reactions by the Obama administration, defies the logic, defies the imagination. What's going on with that?
You know, for the briefest summary for your listeners, there was a student right here outside of Dallas in Irving School District who brought to school, it was not a science fair day, brought to school something in a suitcase with wires in it, and it looked like a bomb. It looked like you would see if you were to watch, Mission Impossible or any other spy thing. If, you saw that, you would try to take it apart as a bomb. He, at the school that day, showed his science teacher in the morning and said, it's a clock, which all it was, it turned out to be, it's like he went to Best Buy, bought some clock, took it apart, and put it back together inside the suitcase. And the teacher said to him, don't take it out again. So he got to the next class, and he took it out again, and it looked like a bomb. It alarmed people, and so the teacher asked him what it was, and he was, according to the teacher, the principal, and the police who later got involved, very evasive. He didn't answer the questions, and so it made people nervous. The police were summoned. He was eventually arrested, and then within the same day, they dropped charges and released him. But the thing looked like a bomb, and this young student is Muslim. As it turns out, his dad actually ran for president of the country of Sudan, which is a Muslim-majority country. He's a very active in Islamic, what's the right word, Islamic activities in Florida first, and then came to Texas, and there was a sense it was kind of a setup. So he made a big complaint about the fact that he was mistreated, or his claim that he was mistreated by the school, by the elected officials. And just as a quick background, the same city where this is happening, it's called Irving, Texas, has a mayor who has been very proactive in saying, we are going to support American law for American courts. Because in the same city of Irving, there was a Sharia law court set up by, it's got among the highest per capita Muslim populations for big cities in America, and they had a Sharia law court set up. So the city said, you know what, we're standing for American law and American courts. We don't do Sharia law here. So this young man got all sorts of national attention. He got invited to the White House. He got all sorts of emails from the head of Facebook and Google saying, wow, great job, Ahmed. And his name is Ahmed. So anyway, where we are now is he was so outraged by how he was treated that he and his family moved to the country of Qatar, however, Qatar. They live over there now. And as it turned out, it was a fabulous thing for the school and the city. The girl who was the valedictorian at this same high school this year in 2015 is Muslim, and she wrote a letter that's now been to Freedom of Information Act, been released to the media, and she said, hey, you know what? I'm a Muslim. I went through this high school. This is the most accommodating, kind, good high school. Nobody ever treated me badly. Everyone accommodated my prayer time requests, accommodated my desire for whatever. She was obviously a stellar student, and she's singing the praises of this same high school and the same principal. And so she really put a big damper on his complaints. But now this young man, Ahmed, his family has hired a lawyer, and they are threatening to sue the school district and the city for $15 million. There's a lot of sentiment in Texas, at least, which is a pretty conservative place. But just saying, no, you don't pay him anything. There's a sense that it was a setup to embarrass or frustrate the school.
Well, it was obviously that, as far as I'm concerned, and now he's saying that he doesn't like living in Qatar, wants to come back to the United States of America. And my comment on that would be, fine, drop your lawsuit, we'll think about it. But that's neither here nor there. I don't know what's going to happen to that. A lot of callers standing by, and I still have a lot of questions for you, Debbie, but we're going to actually defer to the callers, and we'll start things out with Bruce in Grosse Pointe Farms here on the Patriot. Hi, Bruce. You're on with Debbie Georgatos. Go.
Hi, John. Hi, Debbie. I'd countersue. I'd countersue, and I'd say, because you have to go into a discovery phase, wouldn't you, in something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think Clock Boy would appreciate the scrutiny. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about really quick is I've been saying this for a long time. Political correctness is going to get us killed. It's gotten 14 people killed in San Bernardino, and the neighbor who had noticed something said that he did not report it because he was afraid of being profiled. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie. Aren't we being advised to report something if we see something? Or does that just apply to non-protected classes in this country?
You are exactly right that see something, say something it is the main mantra they've been putting out to help people, to encourage people to speak up. Yeah, it's amazing. Exactly right. And that the political correctness is what caused that neighbor. In fact, there were two neighbors who both said saw strange things, didn't want to speak up, and this is a result.
Well, this reminded me of the aftermath of September 11th, when one of the security people at the Boston Logan Airport, I believe, had some trepidations or uneasy vibes, I guess you call it. But he let one of the hijackers through. I forget which flight it was. It might have been 77, or I know it wasn't Flight 93. But and he was just so torn up inside. I don't know if he's recovered from that.
Yeah, and back on 9/11 also, there were people who taught the pilots, these hijackers who flew the planes into buildings, taught them how to fly, and they said later, we kind of wondered why they never wanted to learn how to land.
Yeah, that I think that would have been one of those ding, ding, ding moments for me, for sure. Bruce, I appreciate the call. Thanks very much for joining us. Our guest is Debbie Georgatos, and we're talking about conservatism as it relates to females and as it relates to Americans. And if you want to ask a question of Debbie, feel free to give us a call at 800-923-9385. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to ask Debbie's opinion on a couple of other items. We also have a lot of callers standing by. We're going to get to them. And be patient. If you're trying to call and you get it busy, we'll get to you. Just give us a chance. Here on FM 92.7, AM 1400, The Patriot.
The John McCulloch Show is brought to you in part by Dr. Richard Klein at the Michigan Head and Neck Institute.
FM 92.7, AM 1400, The Patriot. My guest is conservative radio host and author Debbie Georgatos. She is out of the Dallas area. All the information to contact her, to listen to her radio show, to get her book and so forth at facebook.com/thepatriotdetroit. Lots of callers standing by, and let's just get right back to them. Randy in Detroit, you are next on The Patriot. Go ahead. You're on with Debbie.
You realize Jews and Christians also use arbitration based on their own religious beliefs as well. There's really systems in Sharia law, right? And this is also limited to what's legal within the United States. That is, no religious arbitration can't supersede what's legal.
Randy, I'm really sorry. Debbie, you're having trouble understanding him, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I can't tell what he's saying.
Yeah, Randy, you get to another phone or whatever. You're calling on your Obama phone, I think, and you got to quit using that thing. 800-923-9385 is our number. Here's Don in Shelby Township on The Patriot. Hi, Don, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. I'm sorry I didn't hear a whole lot about what your guests had said on the show, but I wanted to at least add something to this, and that is that, every day I speak to a lot of people. I know you know that I own health insurance agencies. And one thing I can tell everybody is that no matter how much they talk about everything that could be right or wrong about Obamacare from either side. It doesn't matter. They are not going to take down Trump. I hear it left and right, and everybody, out of 100 people I talk to, at least 92 to 93 people will be voting for Trump, no matter what the media or the establishment says. Because politically correct and everything else that we all know to be just so unbelievable on what has happened, that the elephants and donkeys has kidnapped and screwed the eagles, that there is no way that the only one that's going to stop Donald Trump will be if he decides not to run.
All right, Don, I appreciate the call. Let's let Debbie comment on that, because it's a very interesting observation. And Don, by the way, is a very political caller, also has run for office and so forth, Debbie. But what he really has his finger on the pulse of the people because of his insurance agencies. And if 92% of the people vote for Donald Trump, what choice will the establishment really have but to put him up for consideration?
You know, I don't really, although you'll hear people saying that GOP, RNC are thinking about some strategy to get around Trump, I don't think there is one. I think that for many months I would say, well, I was saying on every interview, I think Trump is probably going to peter out because, you know, he's making some good, feel-good America. This is a good country. Mostly what people hear from Trump is he's reassuring Americans, America's good, America deserves to be back on track. People are tired of hearing America just being disparaged by this president and by the left, and frankly, sometimes by the GOP. But I no longer feel, as I used to, that Trump will definitely peter out. I think the only thing I would say about this is, I think that I mentioned Ted Cruz earlier. I think Ted Cruz is the only other outsider. I mean, I know he's a member of the Senate, but barely. No one there is speaking to him. I think he's the only one who might have a chance to come around and maybe get parallel with Trump. I think Trump may win the nomination. And this actually leads to another point I was hoping we would touch on tonight, which is this. I hear people say, what good does it do to support Trump or Cruz? Because even if they get in, the establishment, certainly the Democrats don't like them, and even the establishment GOP don't like them. And so they won't get anything done. They won't push anything forward because the establishment in both parties, especially GOP, will put hurdles in their way at every step of the way. But I actually do not think that's true. I think that Trump or Cruz wins, and I think that whoever wins on the GOP side, it will be by a significant, it'll be a mandate election. It will be a message to Washington that we like what this person's saying. I think the GOP will not have any choice but to go along with it. And the other thing is, the voters, I mentioned earlier the one issue about Chamber of Commerce and how Chamber of Commerce is undermining the effort to bring him. We're trying to stop President Obama and his amnesty he's trying to get. I think that kind of issue, if Trump or Cruz wins and gets in, the American people will put enough pressure on Chamber of Commerce and on their elected officials that they're eventually going to have to turn around and put forward the agenda that Trump and Cruz ran on. I really do think if they get in, they will be effective. You won't get rid of every establishment person. A lot of them will think they'll hang out and hide out for 4 or 8 years in Washington and hold on to their precious power. But I really think it could be a very turning the corner on America election, and I think a lot of people want that.
I do too. But speaking of elections, they had elections in Chicago, and they elected Rahm Emanuel as their mayor. And he appointed I believe he appointed the commissioner of police. Now, one group, Black Lives Matter, is bringing the town to its knees and demanding that the mayor be removed from office. How does that work in keeping with the Constitution of Illinois, the Constitution of the United States of America, that one group can put that kind of pressure on and expect those demands to be met? Do you think this is the wave of the future, or does this need to be put down look, folks, if you don't want him in there, fine, wait for Election Day. Talk to me about that.
I really think what we're watching with the Black Lives Matter movement and on college campuses, the Million Student March and other similar We Stand with Mizzou type things, they're actually very dangerous in this country because what they're really doing is undermining the rule of law, undermining the entire structure of our country, starting with the Declaration, but the Constitution, the whole idea of elections, and that we, the people, own the power. It is really a mob mentality. And mob mentality, whether it's Black Lives Matter or the Mizzou thing and the college campus things, it really takes a very strong leader. It will take numerous strong leaders on the national and state level to say no and to mean it, to say we're not going to have mob rule in this country. But this capitulation, and I'll tell you, I had a college professor on my show last week who's an African-American conservative who's being driven out by students on her campus for these kinds of things. Students just saying, essentially, we don't like your conservative views, we don't like your Christianity, and they're trying to drive her out. And we were lamenting about how back in Ronald Reagan's time, when he ran for governor, one reason he won that election for governor in California, there were protests at Berkeley, and he didn't have authority over Berkeley, but still, his speeches, his tone, his determination says, we are not going to have the mob run the colleges or run this country or run the city of San Diego, or of Chicago. That's what's needed. It is a really firm and lock arms, but we have too many people on the right just quaking in their boots, afraid to be leaders, afraid to be strong, and so we're going to be in trouble, and we're going to be in trouble until we get a strong leader. And I think this is another Donald Trump thing. I think he will shut that kind of stuff right down.
Wow. Our guest is Debbie Georgatos. We're going to take one more quick break here, and then when we come back, we're going to let Debbie Georgatos, conservative talk host and author from Texas, talk to us about something that, well, if we did it, we'd be in jail. But Hillary Clinton is still walking around free and the front runner on the Democrat ticket for President of the United States. Of course, I'm talking to her about her emails, and we'll let Debbie comment on that, and we'll take some more calls as we continue with John McCulloch here on FM 92.7, AM 1400, The Patriot. Is conservative author and radio talk host Debbie Georgatos, and she is from Dallas, Texas. Or not from Dallas, Texas, but she's currently in Dallas, Texas. And Debbie, if I don't get to say this, we get right up to the, get our back against the clock. It's been an absolute delight to have you on. I appreciate your being so generous with your time. We're going to talk again, and maybe we can make this a somewhat regular feature of the program. And I hate to talk business in front of everybody, but I'm really interested in talking to you about that. So we'll be...
John, I've loved being on the show. It's just really fun. I'm loving our conversation, too.
Well, thank you. I mentioned before we took the break, Hillary's emails. You and I did that. We'd be in jail right now, having put the classified information at risk, and yet looks as though she doesn't care, looks like the Democrats don't care. Just like everything else that she's done throughout her life, she's going to get away with it. She's going to get a complete walk. How can this happen?
Yes, exactly. How can this happen? And I tell you, this is I talk on my show, and you probably use expressions, something like this too. I talk about the building blocks of America. One of the basic things about America, if you change it, you really lose what America is. In this particular case, it's the rule of law. What the Department of Justice is really saying is because she's Hillary and we don't want to make her mad, or because we don't have any better candidate on the Democrat side who could win, so we're stuck with her, or we're going to protect her. They're saying we'll abandon the rule of law, which means, the idea that laws apply to everyone, because we need her to be our candidate. And, it's just creating a server was not legal, putting classified information, going back and forth on email about it wasn't legal. And this is just, I know it's so easy for any of your listeners who maybe you're on the liberal side and you think maybe this is a political attack, and that people criticizing her are just engaging in a political attack. But it's not that. It's really vitally important. It's one of the protections we had in our founding against the creation of tyranny, was this idea that the rule of law applies to everyone. And I don't think the voters, I'll tell you, just in my completely unscientific survey of my Democrat friends down here in Texas, when I ask them about it, the answer is a shrug. Just, so what? They don't care. And so, you're right. There's not going to be a consequence to her.
That's pretty incredible. I wish we had time to take more calls. We don't. I want to give Debbie an opportunity to comment on one last place where we have completely abandoned the rule of law, and that's with our unlimited borders, our porous borders and just amnesty and all these other things that are just fly in the face of the rule of law. And unfortunately, Debbie, we only got 1 minute to do it, so just go.
I'll say that borders and the entire issue of the rule of law, it's worse than the fact we don't enforce our borders, we don't protect who's coming in, but there seems to be a political agenda behind it with this particular administration. The idea is more and more people who some way or other will make their path to citizenship, and the left assumes will be Democrat voters. So it's really, it's destroying the rule of law and the idea of a bordered, structured country to the political benefit of the American left. It's outrageous.
Debbie Georgatos, thank you once again for being with us, folks. The contact information to get a hold of Debbie and to listen to her radio show, to get her book, Ladies Can We Talk, Facebook.com/The Patriot Detroit. All that information is there with the proper links. And Debbie, again, you're a delight. I enjoyed being with you and talking with you. And let's do this again sometime real soon.
I would love that, John. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And we'll be back with a closing thought or two here on the McCulloch broadcast on the Patriot, FM 92.7, AM 1400.